Emily, Sarah, and Mark thought Liverpool's streets after midnight were just quiet. But they were wrong. What followed them that night was watching, waiting, and disappearing anyone who crossed its path. The night in Liverpool was unusually quiet, with only the distant hum of traffic and the occasional clatter of a shutter echoing through the empty streets. Streetlights flickered intermittently, casting long, eerie shadows that stretched across the cobblestones. Emily had finished her late shift at a small cafe in the city center, tired but relieved to finally be heading home. She walked briskly, her footsteps echoing against the brick buildings, her bag slung over one shoulder. Liverpool after midnight had always felt a little different, darker, more secretive. But she never thought of herself as being in danger. As she turned down a narrow alleyway to cut through to her apartment, she sensed something odd. A feeling of being watched prickled at the back of her neck. The alley was empty, save for the occasional stray cat darting into the shadows. She shrugged it off, as nerves and quickened her pace, clutching her bag tighter. Unknown to her, a figure had stepped from the darkness, silently following her. The streetlights cast only fleeting glimpses of the hooded silhouette, and every time she looked over her shoulder, it seemed like nothing was there. By the time Emily reached the main street again, the city felt distant and unfamiliar. Shops were closed, and the streets, normally lively with late-night traffic, were deserted. A security camera above a corner store flickered, catching the tail end of the shadow trailing her. The footage would later show a figure slipping into an alley and vanishing, almost as if it were a ghost. She walked faster, her heart beating in rhythm with the echo of her own steps. Suddenly, she realized her phone battery had died, leaving her without a light, a map, or anyone to call. Panic set in as she fumbled to find her keys, her mind racing with possibilities. She turned a corner and saw nothing but darkness stretching ahead. Somewhere in the distance, a faint sound like the dragging of a heavy object made her stop in her tracks. Emily's instinct told her to run, but fear froze her momentarily, and in that instant, the figure was closer. Minutes later, her apartment building loomed ahead, but she never reached it. Neighbors would later report hearing nothing unusual. No struggle, no cry for help, just silence. In the morning, the city would wake to find Emily had vanished without a trace. Her bag was left at the cafe where she had worked, and her phone remained on the counter, dead. The police began an immediate search, scouring the streets, alleys, and nearby docks, but the city offered no clues. It was as if she had been swallowed by the night itself. What unnerved investigators most was not just her disappearance, but the pattern that seemed to emerge. Emily was not the first. Another young person had disappeared just 3 weeks earlier, under eerily similar circumstances. Both vanished after midnight, both were last seen alone, and both left behind almost nothing. The streets of Liverpool, it seemed, held secrets that only revealed themselves when the city fell silent. Whispers began to circulate, rumors of someone lurking in the shadows, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. Fear gripped the community, leaving every late-night walker wondering if they too could be next. By the time dawn broke over the city, the streets looked ordinary, almost peaceful, hiding the night's sinister truth. Emily's disappearance had opened a door into Liverpool's hidden darkness, a darkness that no one had dared to explore. The first chapter of a series of unsettling events had begun, and the city had yet to realize how deep the danger ran. Every alley, every empty street, every flickering streetlight seemed to carry the memory of what had happened after midnight. The docks of Liverpool had always been a place of mystery, a network of shadowed warehouses, rusting cranes, and abandoned ships that loomed like silent sentinels over the river. By day, the area bustled with trucks and workers, but after midnight, it transformed into something entirely different. The city's criminal underbelly had long been rumored to use these docks as a hidden stage for their operations, and after Emily's disappearance, police began to suspect that something sinister was happening there. Detectives moved cautiously through narrow passageways, the cold mist from the river curling around their boots and the sound of distant water lapping against the hulls of moored ships echoing like whispers in the darkness. It was in one of the old warehouses that investigators first noticed the signs, The walls were covered in strange graffiti, symbols that no one could immediately understand, scrawled in hurried strokes as if the writer had been under pressure. Boxes were stacked haphazardly, some open, revealing clothing and personal belongings. A faint, metallic smell lingered in the air, the mingling scent of rust, damp wood, and something sharper, almost chemical. The scene was chaotic, yet there was a precision in the way items were arranged, a pattern that suggested careful planning rather than random storage. Residents nearby spoke in hushed tones about noises that came in the dead of night. Footsteps echoing along deserted alleyways, soft murmurs, the clinking of metal objects being dragged across concrete. Some claimed they had seen figures moving along the river's edge, shadows slipping silently between the warehouses. No one stayed long after dark. Those who did often kept their curtains drawn, windows locked, and doors bolted. The docks were a place people avoided, and now they seemed to hold the key to a series of disturbing disappearances that had unsettled the city. A local journalist, drawn to the story, began documenting the patterns, piecing together the locations where missing people had last been seen. It quickly became clear that the disappearances were not random. Routes home from workplaces, pubs, and late-night shops all converged in areas close to the docks. Security footage, though grainy, showed fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures lurking, always vanishing before anyone could get a proper look. The pattern was chilling. Someone, or some group, was observing the city's residents, noting their movements and striking when the night was at its quietest. As police delved deeper into the network of warehouses and hidden passageways, they found signs of makeshift living spaces, rudimentary surveillance setups, and even old maps with routes marked in cryptic symbols. It became apparent that this was not the work of a single criminal. A coordinated operation was taking shape, a network designed to track, monitor, and control the movements of unsuspecting citizens. The docks, once a symbol of trade and industry, had been transformed into a stage for something darker, where the city's fears came to life under the cloak of night. Fear spread through the community as the reality sank in. Liverpool streets were no longer just places to walk home. They were arenas of observation, places where anyone could be watched, followed, or taken. The docks had revealed a secret world, one hidden in plain sight, and investigators knew they were only scratching the surface. Every alleyway and shadowed corner seemed to hold a story, and every night carried the threat of another disappearance. As the city slept, the docks remained alive with unseen eyes, a chilling reminder that after midnight, Liverpool belonged to those who thrived in the shadows. The investigation into the disappearances had taken a new turn, revealing a hidden network beneath Liverpool that few had suspected. It was not just a series of random crimes, but a carefully orchestrated system, a shadows society operating under the city's surface. Clues began to emerge from social media accounts, private messages, and encrypted chat groups. Investigators discovered posts warning of after-midnight observers and cryptic references to routes home. The messages were scattered and often vague, but patterns started to form. Victims were being monitored for weeks, sometimes months, before anything happened. Someone was studying them, learning their habits, and preparing for the perfect opportunity. The journalist who had been documenting the docks' activity expanded their search to other parts of the city. Old factories, abandoned houses, and empty parking lots became points of interest. Each location seemed to connect back to the same network, marked not by violence but by surveillance. People reported seeing unfamiliar faces in cafes, on buses, or near bus stops, faces that seemed to appear wherever they went, disappearing as quickly as they arrived. Some residents swore that their routes home had been altered, subtle changes in strangers' movements hinting at someone tracking them. Detectives found that the network operated like a shadowy web, each part connected but hidden. Coded messages led to locations where evidence of monitoring was found. Tiny cameras hidden in ordinary objects, notebooks with detailed descriptions of victims' routines, and maps marked with red dots indicating movements. Even street performers, shopkeepers, and taxi drivers appeared in witness statements as potential observers, Though no one knew who to trust, it became clear that the network was extensive, using ordinary city life as camouflage for something far more disturbing. One of the most unsettling discoveries came from a missing person's phone. Though the device was never found intact, investigators recovered fragments of GPS data showing movement through streets, alleys, and public spaces hours before the disappearance. The data suggested someone had been following closely, keeping a careful record. It was chilling to realize that the victims were never truly alone, even when surrounded by friends or passers-by. The invisible eyes of the network had already marked them long before they vanished. The city's criminal underworld seemed to intersect with this network in unexpected ways. Police uncovered connections between known thieves, smugglers, and underground groups, but no direct motive was apparent. The network's purpose was observation, control, and perhaps intimidation rather than theft or murder. The level of coordination implied long-term planning, surveillance, and patience, traits that set this operation apart from ordinary criminal activity. It was methodical, cold, and precise. As the investigation progressed, fear in Liverpool grew palpable. People altered their routines, avoided walking alone at night, and checked over their shoulders even in familiar streets. The city itself seemed to have become a stage for an invisible audience, one that could strike without warning. Investigators realized that the more they uncovered, the more questions arose. How many people had already been watched? How long had this network been operating? And most unsettling of all, was the network still active, watching them even now? Liverpool, once vibrant and alive, now felt like a city under constant observation. The hidden network had transformed ordinary Uters into a labyrinth of danger, and the after-midnight world had become unpredictable and terrifying. Those who moved through the city could no longer take their safety for granted. Every step could be followed, every turn anticipated, and the truth about what really happened on Liverpool's streets remained just out of reach, hidden in the shadows. The rumors began quietly at first, whispered among late-night workers, taxi drivers, and residents who walked the streets alone. Someone or something was watching. People started referring to the figure as the Night Watcher, a name born from fear rather than fact. Witnesses described a hooded silhouette that appeared in alleys, on rooftops, or across deserted streets, always just at the edge of perception. No one had seen the Night Watcher up close, and yet the presence was undeniable. Footsteps echoed where no one seemed to walk, shadows moved without cause, and for those who had glimpsed the figure, a chill lingered long after it disappeared. Detectives began connecting these sightings to the disappearances. Every victim had reported a vague sense of being followed in the weeks before vanishing. Some even mentioned seeing a figure watching them from across the street, or lingering in the background of photographs. Though the images were always blurry, grainy, and inconclusive, the pattern was undeniable. The Night Watcher had a method, appearing only when the streets were quiet and the city was asleep, never close enough to be confronted, yet always close enough to instill terror. Residents started changing their routines, walking in groups, avoiding shortcuts, and checking behind them at every turn. The city's nightlife grew tense and uneasy. Late-night joggers avoided familiar parks, delivery drivers altered their routes, and even the most fearless locals began taking taxis instead of walking. Some claimed to have seen the Night Watcher's silhouette vanish into shadows, only to reappear blocks away, as if the figure had a knowledge of the city that defied explanation. The fear became contagious, spreading through every neighborhood and seeping into every corner of Liverpool. Police attempted to capture evidence, setting up surveillance cameras and patrols in the areas where sightings were reported most frequently. Footage showed fleeting glimpses, a hooded figure slipping between buildings, vanishing just as officers arrived, or moving in ways that suggested familiarity with hidden routes and shortcuts. Attempts to identify the Night Watcher failed repeatedly, heightening the frustration and fear within law enforcement. It became clear that this was not the work of an ordinary criminal. Whoever, or whatever, was behind the disappearances had studied the city and its residents meticulously, striking with precision and retreating before discovery. The Night Watcher's presence extended beyond observation, Some witnesses described subtle manipulations, streetlights flickering as a figure passed, doors left ajar when they should have been locked, and items moved slightly, suggesting someone had been inside while no one noticed. The pattern was psychological as much as physical, instilling anxiety, paranoia, and the constant awareness of being monitored. It was a game of control, and the night watchers seemed to always be several steps ahead. The investigators realized that this figure was the key to understanding the entire operation. All the evidence pointed toward a central observer coordinating the disappearances, monitoring routines and selecting targets. The night watcher was more than a witness to the crimes; they were orchestrating them, using fear and stealth as tools. Liverpool, once a city of nightlife and energy, had transformed into a labyrinth of shadows where ordinary citizens could no longer feel safe. Every street, alley, and empty park carried the potential for the unseen, and every step after midnight became a test of awareness, patience, and survival. As weeks passed, the legend of the night watcher grew. Some said the figure was a ghost, others a human predator. But all agreed on one thing: after midnight, no one in Liverpool could move freely without the sense of unseen eyes following, watching, and waiting. The city itself seemed alive with tension, the streets whispering warnings that no one could fully understand. The tip came late one rainy evening, a single, anonymous message that pointed investigators toward a condemned building in the heart of Liverpool. Its windows were boarded, bricks crumbling, and the front door hung loosely on its hinges. From the outside, it appeared abandoned, just another forgotten structure among many. But something inside felt different, as if the building itself was holding its breath, guarding a secret that had been hidden for years. Police moved cautiously, flashlights cutting through the darkness, the sound of dripping water echoing off the walls. As they explored the ground floor, there was nothing unusual: dusty floors, broken furniture, and graffiti covering the walls, but a trapdoor in the back corner caught their attention. It led to a narrow staircase descending into darkness, and a faint metallic odor grew stronger with each step. When they finally reached the basement, what they found stunned them. The room was large and meticulously organized, yet chilling. Shelves and boxes were filled with personal belongings of missing residents: phones, wallets, clothing, and even handwritten notes. Each item seemed carefully preserved, catalogued in a way that suggested planning and intent far beyond ordinary criminal activity. Among the personal effects were journals belonging to some of the victims. Pages detailed routines, late-night walks, routes home, and even small habits like which cafe they stopped at for coffee or how long it took to get from the bus stop to their apartments. It was as though someone had been studying these lives for months, preparing for the moment when the victim would be most vulnerable. Investigators realized that the disappearances were not impulsive. They were calculated. Every step, every decision had been watched, logged, and predicted. The basement itself was a labyrinth of storage. Boxes were stacked neatly along the walls, separated by months and years, some marked with dates, others with cryptic symbols. Tiny surveillance devices were found hidden among the belongings, cameras and recording equipment used to monitor movements, not just of the victims, but of the investigators themselves. Whoever had been running this operation wanted to ensure they were always a step ahead, always in control. The scale of the collection indicated that the night watchers' reach extended far beyond the city's immediate awareness. What made the discovery even more disturbing was the absence of any signs of violence in the basement. No blood, no restraints, no obvious harm. It seemed that the objective had not been to injure, but to observe, to collect, to dominate. Fear had become a tool, as powerful as any weapon. The victims' belongings, meticulously catalogued, were evidence not of attack, but of surveillance, a chilling reminder that being watched can be as terrifying as being hurt. The revelation sent shockwaves through the city and the police department. The scope of the night watchers' operation was staggering, and the implications were terrifying. It wasn't just the victims who had been at risk. The entire city could have been watched without knowing it. Every alley, every street, every path home, could have been under surveillance for years. Investigators realized that uncovering this basement was just the beginning. The network behind it was sophisticated, patient, and disturbingly clever, capable of slipping back into the shadows at any moment. Liverpool streets suddenly felt smaller, tighter, as if the city itself had contracted under the weight of the secret below. Fear was no longer a story told in whispers. It was tangible, a living presence that hung over every empty street after midnight. And yet, even with the basement uncovered and the evidence catalogued, one terrifying truth remained: the night watcher had not yet been caught, and the city's darkness still held secrets waiting to be revealed. The discovery of the secret basement had shaken Liverpool, but the investigation took an even darker turn when evidence began pointing inward. Among the files and notes recovered, investigators found anomalies, communications, and patterns that suggested someone within the police department had been providing information to the night watcher. The realization struck like a thunderclap. The very people sworn to protect the city may have been enabling the disappearances. Suspicion spread quickly, leaving officers wary of their colleagues and every decision fraught with tension. Detectives combed through months of case files, emails, and call logs, looking for inconsistencies. A senior officer, someone trusted and respected by peers, became the focus of their scrutiny. This officer had been assigned to coordinate investigations related to missing persons, yet anomalies in their reports and the timing of their actions hinted at deliberate interference. Every lead that could have helped capture the night watcher seemed to have been misdirected, delayed, or suppressed. The betrayal was not obvious at first. It had been subtle, calculated to avoid detection while maintaining the appearance of diligence. The implications were chilling. For years, someone with intimate knowledge of police procedures, patrol schedules, and investigative strategies had been feeding information to the night watcher. Each disappearance, each missed opportunity, was potentially orchestrated by someone wearing the same uniform, meant to safeguard the city. The network was more sophisticated than previously imagined, combining surveillance, manipulation, and insider knowledge to maintain its grip over the streets of Liverpool. Investigators realized they were fighting an enemy that knew their every move, anticipating their actions, and exploiting their trust. The sense of paranoia within the department grew. Officers questioned every assignment, every interaction, every piece of information. Routine patrols were scrutinized, and even the most mundane actions were examined for hidden motives. Trust, once foundational in the force, became a fragile and precious commodity. Detectives conducting fieldwork had to consider the possibility that their movements were being monitored not only by the night watcher but also by a traitor within their own ranks. The city's safety depended on unmasking the insider, but the task was treacherous. Revealing the betrayal without tipping off the night watcher required meticulous planning and secrecy. Meanwhile, the night watcher continued to operate. There were no signs of retreat or hesitation. The combination of an internal informant and an outside observer had allowed the network to remain nearly untouchable. The city's residents, already gripped by fear, were unaware that the very officers they relied upon might be complicit. The streets after midnight became a maze not only of shadows and hidden observers but also of uncertainty about who could be trusted. The betrayal intensified the urgency of the investigation. The detectives realized that capturing the night watcher was not just about rescuing victims or dismantling the network. It was about restoring faith in the city's institutions. One wrong move could alert the insider, allowing the night watcher to vanish once more into the darkness. Every surveillance setup, every stakeout, and every lead had to be carefully controlled, leaving no room for error. Liverpool had become a city under siege, its heart of law enforcement infiltrated, and its citizens unknowingly at risk, while the true danger remained both outside and within. As the truth settled over the police department, the tension was palpable. The night watcher was no longer just a mysterious figure in the shadows. They had a partner in betrayal, an ally who made every step toward justice more dangerous and every night on the streets more terrifying. The hunt had become personal, and Liverpool itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the moment when the traitor and the observer would finally be exposed. The pursuit began quietly, almost imperceptibly, as detectives tracked a lead to a warehouse along Liverpool's docks. The rain-slicked streets reflected the dim glow of streetlights, turning puddles into mirrors that distorted shadows. The building looked ordinary from the outside: rusting corrugated metal, boarded-up windows, and the faint stench of the river. But investigators had learned by now that appearances could be deceiving. Inside they found signs of movement, footprints in the dust, discarded items, and the faint sound of whispers echoing through the concrete corridors. Every step felt like walking into the unknown, each corner hiding potential danger. The interior of the warehouse was vast, a labyrinth of crates, scaffolding, and makeshift walls that created a network of hidden passageways. Flashlights revealed glimpses of personal belongings scattered on the floor: clothing, phones, wallets, remnants of those who had disappeared. The air was heavy with a metallic tang, a mixture of rust and something sharper, more unsettling. Investigators moved cautiously, aware that the night watcher could be anywhere, always observing, always waiting. Every creak of the floorboards set nerves on edge. Deeper into the building, they discovered tunnels leading beneath the warehouse, a hidden maze that had been carved with precision. The walls were lined with shelves containing journals, surveillance equipment, and maps that traced victims' movements across the city. The scale of the operation was staggering. It was clear the night watcher had not only observed, but documented and controlled every step. Some items suggested that the captives were monitored for weeks, their routines meticulously logged before the night watcher acted. The investigators realized they were uncovering the physical manifestation of years of planning, a shadow network that had eluded capture through careful preparation and stealth. Then came the cages. Hidden in a secluded section of the tunnels, they found several victims, alive but terrified, huddled together in small, confined spaces. Panic and relief mixed as officers moved to free them, checking for injuries, and attempting to calm them. The victims' eyes told the story of months spent under surveillance, of constant fear, and of being controlled in a way that had left them emotionally scarred. The night watcher had not harmed them physically, but the psychological manipulation was evident. Every routine, every choice had been monitored, turning ordinary citizens into subjects of a terrifying experiment in control. The night watcher was cornered in a narrow passageway, the figure hooded and silent. For a moment, the pursuit ended in stillness, the tension almost unbearable. When apprehended, it became clear that the obsession had been control, not violence. The figure had orchestrated everything with meticulous care, predicting movements and striking when the victims were most vulnerable. The revelation shocked investigators. This was not a random predator but a mastermind of observation, someone who had studied fear and learned to manipulate it to perfection. The warehouse, once a hidden fortress, now lay exposed. Every hallway, every tunnel, every shelf of collected edits told a story of obsession and secrecy. Liverpool had been infiltrated by a methodical, patient observer who had used the city itself as a stage. Yet even with the night watcher in custody, the scale of the network and the reach of its surveillance left lingering unease. The city had glimpsed the darkness lurking behind ordinary streets, realizing that for years unseen eyes had followed residents home, silently documenting every move. As dawn approached, the rescued victims were taken to safety, and the warehouse was sealed for evidence. Liverpool streets slowly filled with morning light, but the shadow of fear remained. The night watcher had been caught, yet the chilling knowledge that someone could manipulate the city from the shadows lingered in the minds of all who had witnessed the aftermath. The hunt had ended, but the terror of what happened after midnight would not fade so easily. The city of Liverpool awoke to a sense of cautious relief, though it was tempered by an undercurrent of lingering fear. News of the night watcher's capture spread quickly, dominating headlines and dominating conversations in cafes, bus stops, and homes across the city. The victims had been rescued, and the secret warehouse had been secured. Yet despite the visible victory, a quiet tension remained. People could not shake the feeling that the darkness that had stalked their streets was still, somehow, alive. For those who had experienced the long months of disappearances and surveillance, trust in their surroundings had been permanently altered. Investigators reviewed the evidence painstakingly, cataloging hundreds of items from the warehouse, personal belongings, journals, maps, and surveillance equipment. Each piece told a fragment of the larger story, a story of observation, control, and obsession that had been quietly unfolding for years. Officers were struck by the scale of the operation, the meticulous planning, and the patient precision with which victims had been monitored. It was as though the night watcher had lived parallel to the city, moving unseen while the lives of ordinary citizens became his subjects. Despite the arrest, the sheer depth of the network suggested that more layers could still be hidden, more secrets yet to emerge. Residents began returning to routines cautiously, though the fear of after-midnight walks lingered. The city's once bustling nightlife felt muted, as if Liverpool itself had absorbed the anxiety of its people. Even well-lit streets felt different. Shadows seemed longer, corners darker, and every stranger potentially a silent observer. Parents walked their children home earlier, delivery drivers altered their routes, and night shift workers remained vigilant. The lessons of the night watcher were etched into the city's collective memory, a chilling reminder of the vulnerability of the ordinary. In the weeks following the arrest, questions continued to plague both police and citizens. How long had the night watcher been operating undetected? How many people had been observed without their knowledge? Were there others, still hidden in the city's shadows, who had learned from or assisted the night watcher? While the main figure had been caught, the psychological impact lingered, a gnawing uncertainty that the visible victory could not erase. Liverpool had glimpsed the fragility of safety, the way a single person could manipulate the environment and control the lives of many without ever being seen. Counseling and support services were set up for victims, though their trauma was not easily mended. Many spoke of sleepless nights, anxiety, and a sense of being perpetually watched, even in secure locations. The human cost of the night watcher's obsession extended beyond physical danger. It was a violation of trust, an invasion of privacy, and a lesson in fear. Liverpool had survived the ordeal, but the experience had reshaped the city's identity, casting a long shadow over its streets that no amount of sunlight could fully erase. As the city moved forward, the docks and abandoned buildings where the night watcher had operated remained quiet, sealed by authorities but still shrouded in the memory of what had occurred. Rumors persisted, whispers that someone else could take up the mantle, that the eyes in the shadows had not been fully vanquished. Liverpool had confronted its hidden darkness, yet it had learned a sobering truth. After midnight, the streets were never truly empty, and some stories of the city's nights would remain only half told, haunting the minds of those who lived through them. The city slowly returned to its rhythm, but a pervasive tension lingered, a quiet vigilance among its residents. Liverpool had endured, but the shadow of the night watcher had changed the way its streets were seen, felt, and feared. The lessons of the night remained etched into the city's collective consciousness, a reminder that in the darkness, someone was always watching, and some truths of Liverpool's streets after midnight might never be fully revealed.